Welcome to the Businesstalk podcast. I am your host Deepak from India. We are honored to welcome Dr. Nigel Nicholson, Emeritus Professor of Organisational Behaviour at London Business School, as our distinguished guest on today's podcast episode. Professor Nigel Nicholson has been faculty member at LBS since 1990. Before embarking on a career in business psychology, he worked as a journalist and remained a frequent media commentator on business issues. His research focuses on psychology of family business, leadership and biography, financial decision making, and people skills in management. He has authored over 20 books and 200 articles covering these areas, as well as topics such as innovation, organizational change, and executive career development. Professor Nicholson led a major research project on risk and decision making among finance professionals, resulting in the book Traders, Risk, Decisions, and Management in Financial Markets. His work on family firms culminated in Family Wars and The Eye of Leadership Strategies for Seeing, Being, and Doing, offering a fresh perspective on leadership through the lens of biography in the self. At London Business School, he has served as a chairman of the Organizational Behaviour Department, research dean, deputy dean, and a member of the governing body. He has been a guest professor at universities across Germany, the United States, Africa, and Australia, and has received recognition from the Academy of Management and the International Association for Applied Psychology for his contribution to the field. Professor Nicholson has directed several executive programs at London Business School, including High Performance People Skills and Proteus. He has also served on the advisory board of the Institute for Family Business and chaired the evolution panel for the JP Morgan Private Banking UK and Ireland Family Business Owners Program from 2003 to 2010. This episode features Dr. Nigel Nicholson as he shares key insights from his upcoming book, Unique You: How Individuality Works and Why It Matters. It's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Nigel Nicholson to the conversation. Dr. Nicholson, it is an honor and privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Professor, your book introduces the idea of unique individuality. How would you describe UI in simple terms, and why do you think so much of it remains hidden even from ourselves?
It's very strange, isn't it? Because that nobody has written a book really that acknowledges human individuality and to understand how it works. And that's, in a sense, it's something we all take for granted that we're all unique. But a lot of the time we go through life pretending it's not true or acting as if it's not true. We join groups and we in relationships we sort of submerge ourselves and so on. We kind of we're only interested in people's quirks and so on because they make a nice story or whatever. But if you take the idea seriously, the idea is that nobody like you has ever lived on this planet before. Nobody like you will ever live on it again in the future. So, and this uniqueness means your own experiences are really just yours, and nobody else can actually have them and share. We share quite a lot, but when we share with people, it's sort of a parallel experience. So I know what it feels like to be unhappy, but I don't know what your unhappiness feels like. I know what my unhappiness feels like, or happiness, or whatever. That's and I call these. I have what I call the four laws of unique individuality, and that's the first law. The second law is really what Freud understood, and that is a lot of what happens to us or what happens in our minds is unconscious. That we are animals, and the brain operates to look after your body, and it does a very good job of it mostly, and it does all kinds of things that you don't understand. It also gives you lots of feelings that you don't really understand, and feelings that can come from all sorts of places. So, for example, we think, we're sad for a reason, but actually we might be sad because we got a vitamin deficiency that we're not aware of, or something like that. So, our knowledge of how we function is quite limited. So we are continually surprising ourselves. So that I think takes quite. When you start unpacking that, it has very far-reaching implications. By the way, there's four laws. I talk about four laws, and the other two laws are to sort of say, well, the one is, of course, nobody, you can't really know anybody else. Now, you might be very close to your partner and your children, but in a sense, there's part of them that you will never know, and there's part of you that they will never know. And that takes a bit of getting used to. And yet the fourth law says we have to connect with other people. It's necessary for our survival. In fact, without other people, if that's the only purpose for our existence, actually, is to connect with other people so we can propagate the species, but so we can also become fully human. And you can't be fully human unless you're connected with other humans. As you know, when people have found feral children and so on, children have been raised in the wild by dogs or wolves or something. It's very hard to rehabilitate them. It can happen. So that's the fundamental starting idea for the book, but it goes further than that. Yes.
Professor, you outline destiny, drama, deliberation, and development as dimensions of life. How do these four interact to shape our personal narratives? And can someone consciously influence them?
Yes. So I use this framework, the four Ds I call it: drama, destiny, drama, deliberation, and development, because they're like the threads that weave a life. If you can imagine a life as being like a tapestry, and it's woven, as it were, the colors of it are woven by these four forces. Well, the destiny are the stuff you can't change. That is your DNA, which includes a lot of your personality, and a lot of personal attributes are encoded in your DNA, about 50% actually. And of course, your body and your body type and so on. The place you were born, the time you were born, the family you were born into. These are all things you can't change, and you carry these in your life as to some extent as your legacy, as your destiny. Use the word destiny. I don't use the word destiny in the same sense as you might say, oh, you know what's going to happen, or it's foretelling the future. I mean, to some extent, character is destiny. We do make our own lives to a large extent through who we are, but we're not helpless, and we can make choices. And one of the important free will is an important element. Our ability to choose what we pay attention to, our ability to move things along. So we can walk away from our destiny. We can't leave it. We can't eradicate it. We may still carry it in residue, but we don't have to obey it. We can say, just because I was born like that, I don't have to live like that. So we could make intelligent choices about how to live, but it's not limitless. What I call destiny means you can live maybe 1,000,001 lives, but maybe you can't live 1,000,002. Maybe there's a point beyond which there are things you can't be, and we tend to know what some of those are. The drama, of course, is happening all the time. Life is full of drama. And indeed, we think we're acting in a very planful, rational way, but we make things up as we go along. We improvise. We're a bit like Indian musicians playing a raga in a fun, wonderful concert. They have a starting point, but they can ornament and they can produce, and they can use the drama of the music, as it were, to weave their own patterns. So we respond to drama, and drama reveals who we are. And we can't avoid life's dramas. When you take a job, you don't really know what job you've taken until you live it. Even when you marry somebody, you're only halfway through or less of discovering what kind of person they are. So every day is full of drama, so the important thing is to learn from those dramas, and that's where the last 2 points come in. One is deliberation, and the other is development. I'll just start with development so far as we develop naturally. We can't stop ourselves learning, and we're continually learning. And of course, we don't always know what we're learning. I mean, you think you're learning one thing, but actually you're learning about another thing. A lot of my Indian students, and I talk about cricket and how important cricket was in their lives. And of course, they don't learn about the game of cricket. They learn about what it means to be a human being and be in a team, and all sorts of other things from playing the game of cricket. Deliberation are the times when you stop and think and make a decision. Now, we actually do this rather less than we think. A lot of the time we operate on lots and lots of little ways. Of course, every conversation. I mean, this is what we're doing now to some extent. I'm making this up as I go along, and so are you. To some extent, we're improvising, but a lot of the time we're following in familiar channels. And we make big decisions often on the basis of very small data, And very casually, we say, "Oh, I'll red door, green door. I'll take the green door." When you're offered a job or something, and it becomes life defining. You find yourself going down a channel that you wouldn't have gone down otherwise. But the deliberation is the times when you actually do stop and say, "Oh, I choose this door or that door," and those times are very important. Often we make and drama and deliberation often work together. So, for example, you have a bereavement, you lose somebody who's very close to you, and it changed your life. Then it triggers you into a sort of action of doing things that you might not otherwise have done. So from these four, you can tell us, but it has to be biographical. All of this comes from my work with biography with my students. I run a biography class for our Sloan students who are mid-career, midlife people and experiencing a lot of change. My book tells lots of their stories, and if you read my book, you'll find lots and lots of fascinating stories about people in midlife, especially who have used these four, and my students all use this framework to help describe and explain and tell their own stories.
Professor, you emphasize that family, friendship, and love act as a mirrors for our individuality. Could you share an example of how a relationship might reveal hidden aspect of who we are?
Yes, I mean in the book I tell quite a long story actually about a Brazilian couple, and they came into my class and they were clearly very much in love. I could see how much in love with they were, and they both told their stories. And one had lost his wife very tragically, and the other one had a painful divorce and so on. But it's the way in which they kind of click with each other. I use the concept of resonance quite a lot when I talk about relationships. Resonance is in physics and chemistry is when one material responds to vibrations in another. It vibrates at its natural frequency, for example. And it happens, of course, in Indian music. If you play the sitar, it has lots of resonating strings, and those strings bring out the richness of the sound. So resonating is when you find yourself responding to something. I talk about beast and ego, and by beast I mean your whole being, your physical being, our identity as an animal. We resonate with things in a way that often we don't understand. We resonate with music, we resonate with nature, we resonate with people. And those resonances so this is one of the problems with things like internet dating, of course, is whether you can trust the resonances that you're getting or not. And the resonances can be misleading and they can be short-lived and so on. So uh, so the whole concept of resonance is very important. And it's through relationships. Relationships do lots of good things for us. I mean, just getting things done in life, and feeling and having companionship is really important to us. But it's also very important that relationships teach us about ourselves. You learn from how other people react to you about what kind of person you are, because we're not always very good at seeing who we are. You don't always need a husband or a wife to tell you what's wrong with you. You can sometimes see for yourself because of the effect you have upon them.
Professor, many people feel pressured to conform to cultural or societal norms. How can someone
Yeah.
navigate these pressures while staying true to their unique self?
Yes. Well, um, I'm a great believer in good manners. It's one of the things that the British, I think, and the Indians too. You have very good manners, and of course, good manners is one of the ways we deal with society. We behave ourselves in public and we do certain things. So, in a sense, we're always tying ourselves down, and to some extent, and to do so actually it takes the edge off this feeling of you might feel alone. I have a chapter in the book called The Dark Side, and in the dark side there's a lot of stuff about how lonely people can get and how detached people can get and how some people really struggle to be their true selves or to feel authentic. And it's very common, I think. Lots of people have these struggles, and so belonging to a culture, to some extent, is a kind of comfort, and also a culture will give you lots of tools for living. Cultures are very useful and resourceful. But on the other hand, there are cultures that are quite oppressive. Even small cultures. I mean, every family has its own culture, for example. And you can see, and I was a long time student of family business, so it's one of my areas where I've worked in, and I've worked in India actually a lot with family businesses in India. I do know that some families are easier to get on with than other families, and some families, that they are more challenging and difficult for their members than others. I spent when I was teaching in the Mohali campus of Indian School of Business. I remember a lot of my conversations with students about how to have a difficult conversation with your parents. you know, because things don't stand still. You have to change. You have to move with the times. And that's one of the big challenges, of course, for family firms is how do they do that?
Dr. Nicholson, comparison, loneliness, and mental health struggles can distort our sense of self. What practical steps do you suggest for recognizing and mitigating these challenges?
Yes. Well, I mean, there's lots of books out there about, how to look after your health, and most of them are very good. And I think religions have a very great part in that. I mean, there's a lot of, in the Vedas and so on, and in the Upanishads and so on, and also Buddhist religion and in Christianity. There are lots of things that give people, I think, a relief from that sense of aloneness and a sense of companionship with others. Um, I myself am not a religious person, but for me, this philosophy, the philosophy or the idea of unique individuality, I find quite a great comfort because it helps me to understand and empathize and to be with other people. Oh, a lot of time people just want to be heard. They want somebody to hear them. I think there's quite a few people who go around thinking, nobody knows who they are. Nobody cares whether they live or die. And I think so reaching out to other people is very important. I think in everyday life, in lots of little ways, whether it's on a supermarket checkout or just with a neighbor or something, is making. And there's a section in the book, and I've written about this before and published about it before, about what I call decentering. And decentering is putting yourself in the shoes of another person. It's quite a tricky discipline because we're naturally self-centered beings. We see the world through our own eyes. But if you try to see the world through somebody else's eyes, then you can find you find there's enormous riches to be had and indeed ways of connecting with other people. Um, it's interesting. My mother went. I tell a story in the book about my mother, who was a kind of hero of mine. She's long dead now, but um, my mother was a communist. Both my parents were communists, and they lived in. I was brought up in a very free and intellectual household where there weren't many rules and so on. It was a very unconventional background. Some people might say, "Oh, well, how wonderful!" It wasn't particularly wonderful because there was no discipline. I had to teach myself all those disciplines. But my mother had a conversion. She realized she was unhappy, and in the middle of this life where she's supposed to be happy, she wasn't happy. And so she went into therapy, Jungian therapy following Carl Jung, which led her on a path to religion, and she became very religious. She still remained quite a radical person in some ways, but for her, that opened lots of doors. Now, I'm not saying, religion is an answer to everybody's problems. It was the answer to her problems. It's not the answer to mine and lots of other people. So people must find their own way, but there always is a way. I think this is very, very important. There always is a way. It just may take time, and you may need the right people to help you.
Professor, you argue that creativity and vision are peak expressions of unique identity. How can ordinary individuals cultivate these qualities in their everyday lives?
Well, you're already doing it, actually. I think you're probably undervaluing what you're already doing in your life. It's not given to everybody to write books or to, or to leave something. I ask people, always ask my students the legacy question, like about, when you die, what difference will you have made? Um, and there's three kinds of answers to this question for any person, and that is number one. Uh, just being alive is a privilege. We are very lucky to be alive, especially at this time where we conquered lots of diseases that used to wipe us out, and we live long times, and we have really unstable times mainly, as long as you're living in the right part of the world. But I call it the three things are to savor, to signify, and to be seen. The first one, to savor, means to enjoy eating and drinking the substance of life, relationships, and so on. And you can be creative and you are being creative in every day, in every conversation you have with your friends or whatever. All of those things are a joy. Secondly, to signify, and the legacy question there is, well, you don't have to write a book or build a temple or do something big to signify, or just having children or just having friends. You've already made a difference to somebody else's life. You've already enriched their life to some extent, and so that may be enough. Just to having left the world in a better place than you found it is maybe quite enough. And the last one is to be seen, is to actually, and that's what we've been talking about up to this point. I think is about how do you to recognize other people and to say, I see your individuality. I can't completely understand it, but I see it and I honor it and I recognize it. Now, if you want to be creative, I mean, it's interesting because I've had executives on my Proteus program and other programs that I've run where a lot of very non-creative people who consider themselves to be non-creative, and we get them doing pictures, we get them doing drama, and it's very easy to get somebody into that space. Very, very easy. And we don't do it nearly enough. We take life far too seriously, and we don't have enough fun, and we don't have enough exploration of those creative play. I mean, play. I mean, I'm a tennis club. Well, you know, play is always creative. Playing anything is creative. And playing with your children, playing in this. So having a playful attitude towards life will certainly release your inner creativity.
Professor, you suggest that the stories we tell ourselves shape our identity. How can someone consciously rewrite their narrative to unlock growth and fulfillment during major life transitions?
Yes. So it's very interesting. In the book I talk about my visit to a school for autistic children. Um, and it's very interesting to see what happens in such a context and how they honor the individuality of the children, because all autistic people are very different from each other, as well as being different from us. I mean, in a sense, we're all neurodivergent at some level. We're all really different. But only they have struggles with things that we find very easy. Um, and so. So you could find that from that working with just making that connection um, may be really really important. Um, so yes, sorry, just um, so sorry. Can you just repeat the question again?
Yeah. You suggest that stories we tell
Oh,
ourselves
the
shape
stories.
our
Sorry, yeah, the
identity.
stories. I'm sorry, I meant the story piece. Yes.
No problem.
So it was on this. It was on a visit to this autistic school. And I was with a young man who I'd met before. Now, this young man is a man in his twenties. I call him Jimmy in the book. Um, this young man his parents were drug addicts. His father died very early on. They turned him into a drug addict when he was a child. His mother then went into a mental hospital, and he was out on the streets with his brother. He went to all kinds of places to be looked after, And he grew up basically thinking, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad person. He had a story about himself, and everybody told him he was a bad person. And he stole in order to pay for his drugs, and he went to prison. At prison, he started learning things that he never learned at school, funnily enough. Prison was probably quite good for him in that sense. He actually started learning things. But when he came out of prison, he went to a drop-in center where a social worker took an interest in him and saw his qualities. Now, I know Jimmy to be a really positive, happy, intelligent, very likable young man. He's a very, very nice man, and he wants only good for himself and for the world. Uh, and it's just that throughout his life, nobody had said he was worth anything. And until somebody said, I see you're worth something, was he able to change his narrative? And changing his narrative, his story about who he was, I mean, it's a switch you could flip. You could say, for example, for a lot of young people struggles, they think, oh, they're unattractive, and they have a narrative about being unattractive, and then they become, they're anorexic, or they do things, self-harm, and all sorts of things happen because people think they have low self-worth. So that's a narrative, and these narratives can be reversed. I mean, the glass can be half full as well as half empty. Is the point, and to say how these narratives are defining. And of course, in leadership, you just have to look around the world and see what leaders are doing. I mean, Donald Trump has really got a very strong narrative, and he's giving it to the world, and it's having certain effects. That some effects people don't like, and some effects we seem to be working rather well. But Putin has a narrative, and Modi has a narrative, and Keir Starmer has a narrative. All these politicians have narratives, and then the narratives are about, this is who I am, this is why I'm here, this is what I'm doing. So it's yours to own and yours to write. And one of the difficulties, I think, in households is that teachers and parents give children bad narratives, or narratives. Almost any kind of narratives are bad if they're not yours. If you take somebody else gives you a narrative and you don't own it, that's clearly highly unsatisfactory. So that narratives have great power. I wrote on the last book I published, which is quite a long time ago now, 2013, was The Eye of Leadership, and by Josie Bass, and Josie Bass published that book. In that book, it's Wiley. I talk a lot about narratives and about leadership narratives, because leadership narratives are what business uses a great deal for strategy and for all kinds of business management.
Professor, how can workplaces and educational system better nurture individuality rather than stifle it?
Yes, it's curious, isn't it? Because the whole point about a school is to develop you, and therefore it should be developing you as an individual. It should be recognizing you. And I think we see this quite clearly at the infant level, because we encourage young children to express themselves, and we don't. Although, in a sense, that's creeping back. People are pushing that age limit back, if you like, before they start testing them and making them do maths exams and so on. And I think there's some places in the world where there's a huge amount of very destructive testing. It's interesting. Japanese spend a lot more time teaching their children about good manners and behavior and so on than they do initially getting them schooled in hard subjects. But within that, then to find self-expression is quite hard. Now, most schools would say they do this outside the curriculum, and they do that through the activities that the school can offer, or the things that you might do in your neighborhood and so on. I think there's a huge scope for more individualization. I think you were probably going to talk about AI shortly, but that's the age we're living in. It's an age when I think more individualization is possible. More personalization, I think, is the word that IT people would use. Personalization, and education is essential. I mean, probably the most sought after school in Britain is Eton College. Eton College doesn't just select the brightest kids. In fact, it doesn't even want the brightest kids, but the most interesting. And it develops them. It's programmed entirely to development. They produced 20 prime ministers for Britain in the last 200 years. I mean, you might not think much of the people they've produced. You might think, well, that's not much of a tribute to the school. But actually, you could say the damage was done later. I wouldn't blame the school for those people. I would blame the other institutions of politics and so on that made them the way they are. But school, you always need to remember that there's a whole person in front of you. And again, coming back to the Wherry school, the autistic school that I went to, and when I took Jimmy there, and Jimmy said, as he looked around the school, why can't all schools be like this? He was astonished and moved. He said he'd never seen anything like it, that this is possible for a school to be like this. And at this school, they get all the kids back into mainstream education. They're not sacrificing anything. They are really doing something for these kids.
Professor, with AI transforming work and society, how can humans protect and celebrate their unique contributions, especially those that machines cannot replicate?
Yes. Well, I don't think we know yet quite what the unfolding picture is going to be. I've already mentioned one thing that's clearly going to happen is personalization. It already happens, for example, if you're in Spotify or one of these other music things, they produce music to your taste, they personalize, or the adverts that pop up on your computer are ones that have been personalized. And in medicine, personalization is going to be going ahead. So you could say AI extends the human. I mean, it makes individuality take on increased power. Of course, this has a great danger. The great danger is that crazy people would use AI to light the fuse that blows us all up. And there are people who would love to see the world go up in smoke, and then with it. I mean, as a final gesture. That's the biggest threat that I see from artificial intelligence. I think the fear that it's going to replace everything that humans do is nonsense. It'll never be able to improvise the way humans can. All AI ever does is use the data that it's already got. It can't create new data in the same way as humans can. And it's incapable of feeling. It can simulate feeling. You can get it to play feeling type games. So I think we need to keep our feet on the ground and to remember we live in a human world, and AI will help us to be more human, not less human, if we handle it the right way.
Professor, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. You
Yes,
end you end with the idea that our uniqueness is both as a gift and responsibility. How can individuals balance self-expression with ethical consideration for the uniqueness of others?
yes. Well, this is a very personal and big question. I mean, the ethical implications, I think, are deeply humanistic. In other words, that we should care for each other and we should care for the environment which supports us, and we are part of that web of life. I mean, I think my perspective is always one that comes. I mean, my background is as an evolutionary psychologist, so this is everything I say to some extent about individuality is based upon this idea of us of this being a quality of us as individuals, um, for an evolved purpose. And of course, the evolved purpose is to find ways of the whole reason we can use individuality was pointed out a long time ago by Adam Smith in economics and by Ricardo, another economist. Uh, and it's the secret of our success as a species is we're able to cooperate with each other in an almost infinite number of different ways, that we have so many different ways of combining our talents and being who we are, that we can build cathedrals and we can build, the Taj Mahal or whatever. We can build these fabulous. We can create amazing things by cooperating with each other. So whatever the answer is to the big ethical questions, it will always be one that brings people together to find areas where we can agree, areas where we can grow, areas where we can build together. That seems to me to be the main implication of what I'm trying to say. I hope so.
Listeners, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Nigel Nicholson for sharing his insights from Unique You, how individuality works and why it matters. We have explored how our uniqueness shaped by biology, experiences, relationships, and the stories we tell ourselves is a both gift and a responsibility. Dr. Nicholson reminds us that recognizing and nurturing our individuality is not just as a personal journey, but as a social one. Our connections, culture, and choices all play a role in shaping who we are. Thank you, Dr. Nigel Nicholson, for helping us to understand that embracing our uniqueness and honoring the uniqueness of others is essential for fulfillment, creativity, and thriving a society.
Yes, can I just add,
Sure.
the book is coming out in February, probably about the second week of February, and it should be available on Amazon and other websites. The publisher is Hogan Press. That's from the Hogan Assessment stable. Um, and so the book should be easily obtainable. I hope, and who knows, perhaps there'll be a Hindi translation. That would be nice. But anyway, we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor
You're
Nicholson.
most welcome. Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you. And I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties earlier. Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.